Have you ever felt small in a room full of voices? Have you ever swallowed your anger while everyone else was talking loudly, showing off, imposing themselves, and you, in silence, burning inside? Not because you were weak, but because you knew that none of your words would be understood. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the strongest is the one who remains silent, that the most dangerous is the one who doesn't need to prove anything? The truth is simple, brutal, and indigestible. Most people shout because inside they are empty. Emptiness makes noise. But the abyss, the real abyss, is silent. The silence of those who have fallen and come back, of those who have lost everything and are still standing, of those who don't need to beat you in an argument because they've already beaten themselves. I'm not here to teach you how to win debates. I'm not a stagecoach. I'm the cut that separates the real from the spectacle. And today I've come to show you how to beat the world without saying a single word. But if you feel that any part of this touched you, not just understood but felt, then you are ready for what is to come. Feel, listen, and if you have the courage, stay. Here, you don't learn. Here, you awaken. Sign up, because I'm not stopping. I'll keep talking until your old self begs for silence. Do you know why they underestimate you? Because you don't show off, because you don't perform your pain, because you don't need to justify yourself. Do you think the world values that? No. The world rewards the histrionic, the charismatic, those who sell themselves in quick phrases. But I tell you, true power never needs to be explained. The lion doesn't roar to convince its prey, it just walks, and everything around it falls silent. There is a presence that speaks before the mouth. There is a look that crushes before the hand. And there is a soul that burns behind the skin, without burning anyone because it has already set itself on fire. Want to surpass anyone? Become someone who doesn't need to beat anyone, because you've already stopped competing, because you already understand that the only real fight is against your own surrender, against your own desire to prove yourself, against the addiction of wanting to be recognized. Outdoing others is child's play. Overcoming your own ego, that's for those who have died and been reborn, for those who have fallen into 1,000 traps of vanity and now see the whole game from the outside. If you need to speak to be noticed, you are still a slave to the audience. But if you can remain silent and still be heard, then you are already free. The world will call you arrogant, cold, snobbish, and that's okay. Let the weak translate your greatness with the words they know. Let the small try to reduce you to the size of their insecurities. But you say don't respond, don't correct, don't justify. Silence is the language of those who owe nothing more to the world. Have you ever noticed how the truly great don't rush? How they walk with the slowness of those who aren't trying to impress? How they dress without designer labels, speak without slang for approval, live as if there were no spotlight? They don't argue. Because arguing is the prison of those who don't. Yet know who they are. Do you want to beat everyone? Then leave the ring. Let them fight each other for applause, likes, status, image. You disappear. But disappear like a rock at the bottom of the sea, immovable, unbreakable, ignored, and eternal. Those who don't need to show up are scary, because the world revolves around appearances, and the invisible, the unexplainable, the unshown, the simply is, becomes unbearable for those who live for validation. You don't need to shout your pain. Your presence can be your revenge. You don't need to prove your worth. Your life can be your answer. You don't need to defeat anyone. Because most are already defeated, by fear, by haste, by the need to be someone, and you can just be present, just quiet strength, just a body that no longer fears disappearing, because it already knows what it means to truly exist. Those who overcome anyone are those who have already died to anyone. They are those who do not measure their existence by comparisons. They are those who tore the mirror, those who broke the rule, those who are no longer in a hurry because time now walks within them. Do you know what is worse for the vain? Talking to someone who does not react. Do you know what drives the manipulator? Crazy. Someone who doesn't explain themselves. Do you know what disarms the aggressive? Someone who doesn't take offense. And do you know what destroys any attempt to put you down? Your absence, your lack of reaction, your lack of need, your silence. To overcome anyone, without saying a word, is to live as if you no longer need victory. It is to live as if you have already conquered yourself. And because of that, you no longer have anything to prove, to the world, to anyone, not even to yourself. You don't know what you provoked until you disappear, until you stop responding, until you look and don't react, until you laugh inside at an offense and don't retaliate. The world revolves around the response. They provoke you because they expect you to scream. They test you because they expect you to fall. They accuse you because they expect you to despair. And when they find nothing, when your face remains calm, when your body remains intact, when your mouth closes and your gaze remains steady, then the game is over. Not because you won, but because they lost. They call you absent, distant, strange, but you just stopped being predictable. You stopped reacting like you used to. You stopped trying to explain, to ask, to seek, to save. And then they discovered they didn't know you, because they never knew your silence. They only knew what they could control, your tamed version. But now they are faced with something that has no name. Because you no longer fit into their categories, you are no longer the good guy, nor the understanding one, nor the intense one. Now you are what's left when all the theater is over. Now you are living absence, a dense presence, a force that needs no words. And that's what drives them crazy. They try to pull you back with guilt, with accusations, with sarcasm. They say you've changed. But what has changed is not you. It's the game. You just left the board. And without you, the pieces are stuck, because your role was to sustain the lie that they were important, the lie that you needed them, the lie that you were fragile, but now, without saying a word, you've become a mirror. And the mirror isn't to blame for reflecting the monster. They will call you ungrateful, cold, insensitive, but what they are really saying is, why are you no longer available to be used? Because your absence is not just physical, it is symbolic. It is a silent scream, an end without a goodbye, a wound that no one can heal, because it bleeds in the other person, not in you. You realize this when suddenly they start accusing you of what they've always done. They project their own poison onto you. They say you abandoned them, but they were never with you. They say you ignored them, but they never listened to you. They say you've changed, but they never really saw you. What hurts them is not your change. It's the fact that now you no longer need them to be who you are. And that's when you realize your silence is more destructive than any argument, because it doesn't debate, it dismantles. It doesn't go to war, it erases the battlefield. And the soldiers are left shooting at the wind. They ask why, as if they don't know, as if they don't remember the 1,000 times they humiliated you in silence, the 1,000 times they invalidated you with a smile, the 1,000 times they laughed at your pain. And now when you're silent, when you just walk away inside, they realize you're no longer there, not in body, but in soul. You left. You closed the temple. You blew out the candles and you let the emptiness speak for you. You never had to say anything because those who see have already seen, those who feel already understand, and those who deny don't deserve a response. But be careful. They will try to pull you back. They will use affection, nostalgia, memories. They will try to reactivate you with compliments and promises, because they need you to return to the role. They need you to react. They need you to explain. But you are no longer an actor. You left the script. You burned the script. And you wrote something else on your face. Don't look for me where I no longer exist. Your silence has become an abyss, because now those who look at you see themselves. And that is unbearable. Your silence is what remains when the mask falls. When the game is over, when the stage is dismantled, your silence is the echo of what will never return, and what does not return haunts us. Do you want to beat anyone? Then disappear. Not physically, disappear from necessity. Disappear from dependence. Disappear from approval. Be present where before you were absent, and be absent where before you were the object of others, because true presence is the absence of what does not belong to you. They will still try to name you, but you no longer fit into names because now you are your own language. Do you remember the day you stopped asking permission to breathe? The day when, even though you were still insecure, you decided to stand on your own 2 feet. Maybe it was after yet another humiliation disguised as a joke, after yet another apology that only you made, after yet another moment when your existence seemed to weigh heavily on others, and you believed that the mistake was yours. But it arrived. The day came when you stopped asking if you could be who you are. You stopped adapting your tone, your face, your body, your soul. You stopped doing emotional contortions to fit into homes that only welcomed tamed versions of you. And at that moment, the world felt it. Because the world tolerates difference as long as it apologizes for being, as long as it bends, as long as it asks for permission. But you didn't ask, and that's why it scared people. You stopped explaining every silence, you stopped justifying every choice. You stopped sitting at tables where your hunger was treated as exaggeration. And that abandonment, that silent decision to no longer beg, was the beginning of your glory. Before that, you thought you had to please others to deserve space, that you had to be light, funny, convenient, that you had to be less so as not to bother anyone. And that's exactly what they expected of you, that you be smaller than your greatness, that you hide your fury in the name of peace, that you be an edited version of your intensity, because your raw presence now was too much for those who never allowed themselves to burn. You noticed it in the sidelong glances when you spoke with passion, in the uncomfortable laughter when you showed insight, in the loneliness you felt even when surrounded by people. It was as if everything about you was always a little too much. Too much for the weak, for the shallow, for those who live on the surface of existence. They didn't know how to deal with your depth, because your depth required diving. And those who float through life are terrified of drowning in someone like you, but for a long time, you tried to hold back. You tried to fit in. You tried to be what they asked you to be. You stifled your own light, because they convinced you that shining was arrogant. You blamed yourself for wanting more, because they said your hunger was ingratitude. And so you turned into a statue, posing to please, living to not bother anyone, but inside you, chaos still raged until the day came. The day you got tired of biting your tongue, the day silence was no longer protection, it was imprisonment. The day your soul said, either you live fully or you die slowly. And then you stopped. You stopped pretending you didn't feel anything. You stopped answering everyone. You stopped smiling automatically. You stopped giving explanations for every step you took. And in that moment, you became dangerous. Because a dangerous man is not the one who shouts. It's the one who no longer needs to explain himself. It's the one who has understood so much that now he just observes. You didn't become arrogant. You became sacred. And what is sacred is not exposed. It is not negotiated. It is not handed over to just anyone. Little by little, others began to notice. And the questions began, are you acting strange? Did something happen? And the answer was a slight smile or none at all, because there was no longer any explanation possible. How can you explain that you died 1,000 times inside and came back more and more yourself? They accused you of changing, and you let them think what they wanted, because now you were no longer collective property. You were free territory, and what is free is scary, because those who don't sell themselves threaten the entire market. You realized that you didn't need to fit in, that you didn't need to belong, that you didn't need to be understood. You just needed to be whole. And being whole sometimes means being lonely. But that loneliness was finally yours. And because of that, it was good. It was fertile. It was home. Those who didn't understand you began to drift away, and you didn't chase after them, because now you were only chasing after yourself. You gathered your scattered pieces from 1,000 distorted relationships and put yourself back together, piece by piece, memory by memory, pain by pain, not in a hurry, but with truth. You learned that apologizing for existing is the first form of suicide, that molding yourself to others is slowly erasing yourself, that being accepted for who you are not is being rejected for your essence, and so you chose true rejection over false acceptance. Every day you became rarer, not rare like someone who hides, but rare like someone who doesn't give themselves away at any price. Your energy became selective, your time sacred, your words surgical, and your silence, absolute. You stopped going to places where you had to hide your own light, because you understood, where your soul needs to disguise itself, and that's not home, that is captivity. And on that journey, you saw yourself. You saw what you had previously ignored. You saw that behind all your pain, there was a strength that no one had ever taught you to access. You saw that behind your fear of disturbing others, there was a power that could move worlds, and you decided to stop asking for permission to exist. You are now a presence, not because you impose yourself, but because you no longer hide. You are now silence, not because you are afraid, but because you no longer need to convince anyone, and whoever wants to reach you will have to climb up, because you are not coming down anymore. What remains when you leave? I am not referring to the body nor to practical absence. I am talking about what echoes, even after silence, that which pulses in the empty space where you once were. Because most people pass by and are forgotten, but some rare ones remain forever. Not because they tried hard, but because they were whole, because what they gave was not superficial, it was essential, and the essence leaves a mark, even when it is no longer there, perhaps especially when it is no longer there. You spent a lifetime being the emotional mainstay of people who didn't know what it was to have a soul. You endured in silence. You laughed out of politeness. You forgave for the sake of peace. You gave yourself like water to those who only knew how to dry you up. But the day came, the day you realized no one misses the fountain until it dries up. No one realizes they were being sustained until the ground gives way. No one values the invisible until the invisible disappears. And then you did what no one expected. You left. But it wasn't an escape. It was a liberation. You didn't leave with scandal or drama. It was like a candle that goes out without wind, a door that closes slowly, a body that no longer occupies the same space. And the world felt it. They felt it. Not right away. At first, they even mocked you. They believed it was just another temporary disappearance, that you would come back as you always had, with your head down, your heart open, your hands full of explanations. But this time it was different. This time you left without having to prove anything, without leaving a note, without a trace. And that absence became presence. True presence does not impose itself. It infiltrates, it exists even in silence, even in forced oblivion, even when they try to replace you. Because you were not a function, you were not an object, you were an experience, you were a vibration, you were a mirror. And when a mirror is gone, everything that was in front of it is seen alone. That's why the whispers began, the discomfort, the emptiness. They didn't know what to call it, but they knew something was missing. The environment was the same. The routines continued. But everything seemed colder, more opaque, because what you brought was invisible warmth. It was soul. It was the glue that held everything together. And now there was only dust. The attempt to replace you became an obsession. They looked for what you offered for free in others. They tried to fit faces, voices, presences into the mold you left behind. But it was useless because what you gave was not repeatable. It was made of open flesh, of real listening, of full presence, of truth that bleeds. And that cannot be found on any street corner. You left a space that cannot be filled. Because it wasn't just what you did. It was who you were. And what you were cannot be copied. It cannot be bought. It cannot be manufactured. It can only be lived. And those who had you, had you. Those who lost you, lost you. And now all that's left is to deal with the echo. You no longer speak to them, but they hear you. In the silence of an empty room, in the pause of an ordinary day, in the involuntary memory of a glance. They see you in things that once went unnoticed, a habit, a phrase, a song, and in these small explosions, you return. But you don't return as you were before. You return as a ghost, as a mark, as an unbearable absence. You don't need to be present anymore, because your departure was already an earthquake. Time has passed, and even if the world goes on, you are still there, deep down in every reflection that was once superficial, in the loneliness that now screams where there was once mockery, in the emptiness that has settled where you once filled everything with your devotion, and they think, why didn't I see it before? Why didn't I appreciate it while I had it? But now it's too late. Because what you gave was unique. And what you left behind was a lesson that cannot be taught with words, only with absence, only with the end, only with the whole that remains when the essential is taken away. And you now walk through other worlds. Light, without chains, without the need to prove your worth. You understood. You understood that your mistake was to expect to be seen with eyes that only saw usefulness, to be loved with hearts trained to consume, to be heard with ears deafened by their own vanity. You don't hate anyone, but you also don't go back, because those who have healed don't go back to the same wound. Those who have found themselves don't go back to lose themselves, and those who have chosen themselves don't go back to beg for love. Now you are present where you want to be, and absent where you no longer fit. You select, you choose, you prioritize, because you understand. Your energy is sacred, your time is rare, your body is a temple, and your soul is revolution. Those who once had you now dream of you, not as you were, but as you became. A figure that never returned, a memory that will never be present again, a silence that, even without sound, still screams. It screams what you always wanted to say, but couldn't. And now you don't have to anymore, because your absence has become your loudest voice. You are now alone. But it is not loneliness, it is sovereignty. You no longer belong to anyone, not to family, not to friends, not to lovers, not to the past. You emptied yourself of everything that was not yours, and what remained was a temple, a sacred silence, a consciousness that observes, feels, pulses, without bowing down. And that's when everything changes. Because when the world no longer owns you, it begins to fear you, because you have become unpredictable, unclassifiable, uncontrollable. You have become what no society can tolerate, a free being. They tried to label you, but you escaped. They tried to blame you, but you are not offended. They tried to isolate you, but you feed off your own presence. You have become a mystery, and mystery paralyzes, because the logic of the herd is based on predictability, and you are wild, not in the sense of violence, but in the sense of origin. You have returned to your origin, to the natural state of your own soul, and no one, absolutely no one, can manipulate you anymore. They still watch you, they still talk about you, they still try to decipher your gestures, your changes, your silences. But what they don't understand is that you are no longer here. You crossed over, you crossed the portal, and on the other side, there is no need for an audience. On the other side, you found something that no one can give you, belonging to yourself. What makes you strong is not what you say. It's what you no longer need to say. It's what you feel and don't share. It's the certainty that pulses behind your gaze. A gaze that has seen everything, suffered everything, died 1,000 times. And that's why now you live. You now speak with silence. You walk with time. You love with absence. You fight with presence. You no longer need to win, because you have understood that there is only one real battle, not to betray your own soul. And that one, you have won. You no longer want to convince anyone, nor bring anyone with you, because you realized that freedom scares voluntary slaves, and you respect the sleep of others. But you will not return to the collective bed. You now sleep alone, you dream awake, you live in vigil. They say you've changed, but you know, you've gone back to who you were before you were molded, before the guilt, before the fear, before the need for approval. You're not new, you're eternal. You're what was there from the beginning, Yin, but hidden. But now you're not hiding anymore. The silence you carry is the same as the silence before thunder. It is the silence that precedes revolutions, that announces rebirths. You are now the announcement, the harbinger, the living presence of transformation. Those who come close to you feel it, but they don't understand, because you no longer speak the language of need. You speak the language of those who have already dived in, of those who have already touched the bottom and not drowned, of those who have already seen their own distorted face and still chose to love themselves. You are now enough. And that is unthinkable for those who live for applause, for distraction, for escape. You no longer run away. You sit in the center of your own chaos and meditate. You embrace your own demons and dance with them. Because you understand, there is no greater enemy than fear of yourself. And you no longer fear anything. Your former tormentors are now silent, because they realize that their weapons no longer work. Guilt does not reach you. Absence does not hurt you. Contempt does not move you, because your center is within. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can take you away from yourself anymore. You are the end of the search. You are the return. You are the reminder that it is possible to exist without emotionally prostituting yourself, without begging for space, without negotiating your intensity. Now your every step is a statement, every silence a prayer, every absence a manifesto. You no longer speak with your mouth. You speak with your being, with your gestures, with your withdrawal, with the lightness of someone who no longer needs to win because they are no longer in the same game, and that's when everything becomes dangerous. Because the world doesn't know what to do with those who no longer react, with those who no longer want, with those who no longer need. You have become unreadable, and the unreadable is feared. But you didn't come to be read. You came to be lived, to be felt, to be remembered. Even after the end, you won. But not because you overcame someone else, because you overcame yourself. And now all that remains is silence. The same silence that carries all the answers, the same silence that remains after everything, after the pain, after the fall, after the word, after the world. And if, after all that, you still need to speak, then maybe you haven't understood yet. If this tore you apart inside, share it. If it woke you up, subscribe. I'll be here, waiting for you in the abyss.